Morning, everyone. Welcome to our transit workshop. It is April 16th, 2024. The time is 9 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Matari, Brooks, and Duncan. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. This is scheduled for 3 hours. However, I don't know it'll last that long, but we're going to try to take a break every hour.
Okay.
All right. Our first item is Meds Group introductions. And Chad, are you
Yep.
lead us?
Yeah, so thank you, Commissioners, for having us here today to talk about public transportation. So I am Chad Engel with the Public Transportation Department, for the record. And then presenting with us today are going to be Chris Yake, the Senior GIS Analyst for JUB Engineering, and then Olivia Metz with the Metz Group. Kootenai County Public Transportation contracted the Metz Group to develop the Kootenai County Public Transportation Strategic Service Plan. Phase 1 of the strategic service plan was completed in August of 2023, which we are going to cover in a little bit here. And then I also have with us today presenting Dorian Combrecht and then Kim Riley, who is going to be here as well from the transit. So I don't know if you need, I presented some additional information on Chris and Olivia there. Just for your information on their backgrounds a little bit as well. So, all right.
All right.
Anything else on that you wanted? Oh.
I don't know, did you want to say anything or?
No, we're just happy to be here. We'll dive into the details of how phase 1 went and talk a little bit about phase 2. So.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so system overview.
All right, so next slide, Jonathan. No. So, as the recipient of Federal Transit Administration funds, Kootenai County is responsible for conducting oversight activities, technical inspections, and then site visits to ensure that subrecipients and contractors of those federal funds are in compliance with regulatory and statutory requirements. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about our operations, and then we're going to go into our fixed route, our paratransit, and our ring ride programs. And then we'll talk and wrap up with our maintenance and our public transportation safety plan as well. Next slide, Jonathan.
Oh, shoot.
All right, so we're going to, like we said, we're going to talk about our CityLink North program. So Kootenai County Public Transportation, we're a part of CityLink, which is the CityLink South, which contains the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and then the areas that they serve in Benoit County, DeSmet, and then Plummer, Worley. And then we're considered CityLink North, so we cover all of the areas in Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and Hayden, and then out into Hutter, and then Dalton Gardens as well. So next slide.
What is that a map of?
Oh, go back.
That you had back there.
So that's the UZA, the old UZA. We don't have the current map of the UZA, but that's the Coeur d'Alene UZA is what that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
UZA.
I don't understand your your acronyms here. Okay.
The urbanized zone for
Okay,
Coeur
so
d'Alene.
that's just the whole region that you serve. You don't serve outside of those purple lines.
We don't go outside of Kootenai County, correct? The
Okay,
CityLink South does, but
So you won't go to the west of Hayden, it looks like, on that purple line.
no, we don't go outside that. We'll talk a little bit more about where
Okay.
our service area is within that UZA.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Go ahead, next slide. Okay. All right, so our fixed route services, as you can see here, we have our A route, which is the orange route down here that goes into the Coeur d'Alene downtown core area. We have our green route, which is the C route that goes up into the Hayden area and also Dalton Gardens. And then we have our blue, which is the B route that goes out into Post Falls and also hits Hutter along Southeast there. So all three of our routes, they operate Monday through Friday from 6 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. And then on Saturday, we operate from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock. It's going to be the same thing with our paratransit services, but the routes go about 180 miles every day in the area. So our A route is approximately 10 miles, the B route 16, and the C route is 15 miles throughout the area. Go ahead, next slide. So as we talked about with our fixed route, they are the larger buses. Each and every one of our buses for the fixed route has a lift equipped on it. So all of them are ADA accessible. They all are able to pick up 800 pounds. That's including the wheelchair and the person on there. We are required by FTA regulations to have lifts that are equipped for 600 pounds, but ours we go a little bit higher. So the newer lifts are 1,000 pounds, but 600 is the requirement that we have on there. We also on the fixed route bus have visual and audio capabilities on there. So it's for those who do have visual disabilities or anybody who is not able to hear as well. They can visually see what's going on. Those stop announcements, they happen at every single stop. They're keyed by our geofences that are part of our ITS system, which is our intelligent transportation system. And that's going to go, we'll go into that in a little bit further detail. Did you have a question?
No, you just clarified your acronym.
Yes, yeah. So we tried to make sure that we took care of all the acronyms throughout the presentation, but also at the end in your packets, there's a list of the acronyms that we should be covering. There may be some that didn't quite get in there, but in the back of the presentation, we did try and put all the acronyms in there. So
Do we have packets?
Did you give us a packet?
I sent those to Julie.
Oh.
But that's okay.
We haven't gotten anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, not anything.
Okay, that's okay. We can get those to you as well.
Yeah, just as we go up, you could
Yeah.
not use the,
Yeah, we won't use acronyms where we can. Well, they'll be in there, but we'll explain them. So, unfortunately, with transit, there is a lot of them. So, go ahead and next slide. So, as part of a safety net and a requirement of having a fixed route system, we also have to have our paratransit system. And so that's part of fixed route. It is that safety net. So it's for those individuals who, due to whatever their disability, they are not able to get to the fixed route, they're not able to use the fixed route. So that could be cognitive disabilities, that could be just their mobility issues, that they're not able to access the fixed route system. So our paratransit goes 3/4 of a mile outside of the fixed route. So any stop that we have, there's a bubble around it that's 3/4 of a mile. And within that, we have to provide paratransit services. So that is an FTA requirement that anytime you have a fixed route service at any of those stops, 3/4 of a mile around it, we have to provide these 88 paratransit. So as part of that, we have an application system. So individuals who are looking to utilize the paratransit system have to apply for the program. During that, they have to go through the application process, and then we do a one-on-one assessment with that individual to diagnose their needs and if they actually are not able to functionally get to the fixed route.
why
So-
is that now?
That's an FTA requirement that we make sure that we're utilizing all the funds appropriately.
So it is required.
Yes.
I don't like that at all.
Yes, yeah. So it is required by FTA, and it's just to make sure that we're using funds appropriately and not just giving the service to anybody and everybody. Because this is a little bit different service. We do go door to door, curb to curb, I'm sorry. We don't go door to door. We go curb to curb for our paratransit service. So what that means is we pull up to their origin, and they have to then ambulate out to the bus. And then we help them get loaded onto the bus, and then we take them to their destination. So we don't cross any thresholds when we get to their destination. We just, again, we drop them off at the curb to their destination, and they have to then ambulate into the building or their location, wherever they're going. So there is a little bit of caveat to that, because individuals who are visually impaired, we do obviously have to help them and assist them a little bit further, but we still try not to leave the bus out of our visual sight when we are helping them as well. So, all right, next slide. All right, here, this is just showing you how our paratransit service and our fixed route is just a mirror image of each other. So they both operate at the same times of the day. They both operate basically the same way. The main difference is that paratransit service is that curb-to-curb service. And then when somebody is scheduling for it, we do have that 1 hour time where we can either pick up or drop off within that 1 hour window. Because if they were to ride the fixed route, it would be the same thing. They would just have that time to transfer buses or to go around, so it translate over into paratransit services as well. There's that little bit of a negotiation on windows of when they need to get to their appointment. So there is that little bit of time there. But as far as everything else, both the fixed route and the paratransit are equipped with lifts. Obviously our paratransit buses, they don't have the stop announcements like the fixed route bus, just because they don't need it. They're not on a set route. They go to different destinations just based off of the passenger load. So that would be the main difference there. All right, next slide, John.
And the passengers call for the
Correct.
service?
Yes.
Like a cab or something?
Yeah, that's correct. So whenever they need a ride, they will call into our dispatch, and then our dispatch then schedules out our drivers so that they can go and do their routes through the day. So, we additionally have our Ring-A-Ride program. So our Ring-A-Ride program is something that was put into place years ago to help those individuals who are 65 and older, who either they're not able to due to disability, or it's not sufficient transportation in their area. So we tried to pick zones that had higher densities of assisted living facilities for those individuals who are 65 and older, where we could go and we could get them to all those areas in which they'd be missing out otherwise. So anytime they need to get to medical appointments, anytime that they need to get to potentially work or anything of that nature, any groceries, then that's why we implemented the Ring-A-Ride program, was to make sure that these individuals still could get to everything that everybody else is able to. So with the Ring-A-Ride program, it's kind of an origin, so we don't take people into Ring-A-Ride zone to Ring-A-Ride zone. It's getting them from the Ring-A-Ride zone into the zone of paratransit where they can then take care of those essential needs. So their groceries, their medical appointments, things of that nature. So that's kind of what the Ring-A-Ride program was set up for, so we can help those. The Ring-A-Ride program is classified under our 5310 funding. So that's also federal funding that is a little bit different. It's for just these specific programs that help those individuals 65 and older. Next slide.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the paratransit and Ring-A-Ride, is that something that is common in larger cities?
Yes.
Okay.
The Ring-A-Ride, not necessarily, but the paratransit, yes, because they are required by FTA regulations. Whenever you provide fixed route services, you are required to provide paratransit services.
Okay, because I've never heard of the Ring-A-Ride in a city.
So there are other cities that do Ring-A-Ride services. They just classify them different. They call them on-demand services.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them actually out there. They just are advertised a little bit differently. So ours is we just have called the Ring-A-Ride.
Okay.
So, as you can see here, we talked a little bit about the UZA, the urbanized zone, the Coeur d'Alene urbanized zone. So these are the areas that we operate within that urbanized zone. You can see our fixed routes going throughout Hayden, Coeur d'Alene, and Post Falls. And then we have the cream colored bubbles around them. Those are our ADA paratransit zones. So those are those 3/4 of a mile around those stops that we have to hit for the paratransit services. Then you see the green zones that are outside of that. Those are our Ring-A-Ride zones. So those are where we're originating, getting individuals who are 65 older, and then bringing them into the paratransit zone for their doctor's appointments or going to medical appointments, and then groceries and things of that nature. So this just kind of shows where we go throughout the different areas. Yeah, so, all right, next slide. I wanted to highlight some of the features that we do have for our services for the fixed route. So we have the ability for individuals to get on Google Maps or Apple Maps, and they can get on and they can put in their origin and their destination, and it'll walk them through different directions as far as walking, if they need to transfer buses, if they need to do anything whenever they're trying to get to their destination. So it shows them exactly how far they have to walk, how long they have to walk, shows them when they need to transfer buses, and then it just has the different times of the day where you can schedule and you can look at the different route times for each of those individual stops. So we went through and we put that information in 2018 into Google Maps and Apple Maps, so individual riders then can plan their trip a little easier and make sure that they are able to utilize our fixed route service whenever they're trying to get to wherever they need to. It was something that wasn't required at the time, but now as we're moving further and further, FTA is starting to require these kinds of things in your services. So it's something that we were preemptive and we already had in place, but it is something that they're looking towards now. Next slide. So as part of the trip planning, we also have, like we talked about before, our ITS system, which is the Intelligent Transportation System. So within this, it gives passengers the ability to, in real time, track the buses. So they can see exactly where they are on the route. They can either do it through the app or they can do it through the website with Passio. On both of them, you can click on stop and you can see what time it's going to be there, the scheduled times. And then you can also click on that stop and you can let the driver know that you're there. So the driver then can anticipate that they're going to have to stop at that location because there's a passenger waiting there for them. So that was something that had been recently added, and it's been very useful to really notify the drivers and let them know that somebody's waiting there for them. It also has been very well received by the passengers. We have many individuals with disabilities who use the fixed route on a daily basis to get to their jobs or to be a part of Project Search, which is just a very cool program that they have here in Coeur d'Alene, where individuals who do have cognitive disabilities, they're able to then learn how to be a part of society as far as getting jobs and things, being able to just be on their own throughout. Since Jonathan's running it, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I don't know if you wanted to look at the website or we can do that at a different time as well. So
Which website?
the Passio Go, so we could look at the buses in real time if you wanted to just kind of see how it worked or how it operated, but we can do that at a different time as well. Or if you wanted on your own time, you could do that.
Well, we're here.
Okay. Okay, so what it does is it takes your location, and if you're on the app or if you're on the website and you do have it enabled to track you, it will put your little signal as a blue dot throughout the routes or wherever you're at on the map location. And it'll show you the direction that you're facing just like you would on any of your Google or Apple Maps or anything of that nature. So when you're on here, you can see the dots with the blue around them. Those are the stops for Post Falls. The green, those are the stops for going on the C route. And the orange are obviously the stops for the A route. When you click on those, it tells you what the stop is, when it's going to be there. And then if you click on it, it gives you the name, and it tells you how long it's going to be before it's going to be there. The little guy on the corner, that's where you would request a ride. So if you click on that, it would then let you know that, let the drivers know that you're going to be there. When you click on the little calendar, it just tells you all the different schedules for that stop and when it's going to be there throughout the day. So it's pretty intuitive. It's very nice for passengers as they're going through. so that they can easily navigate the system. The other thing that we're working on with Passio right now is a trip planner. So you'll be able to go on here and just put your starting location and your ending location, and it'll do everything else for you. So it's basically integrating what you have on Google Maps and Apple Maps into one location. And it just makes it easier because then it has the real-time feed on there so that they're able to go through and just do it all in one spot, so they're not having to flip back and forth. The other nice thing about this is we can put messages, alerts out to the passengers. So if we have a stop that's closed, or if the route is having a detour for construction, or if there was an emergency or whatever the case is, we're able to notify the passengers immediately. If they have it enabled, they can get a push notification on the app, so it goes directly to them on their phone. Otherwise, it has a little red banner that runs across the top saying that there's a new message if they don't have those enabled. They can click on those messages and see what's going on for the services at that time. So you can go ahead and close it out, Jonathan. Thank you. All right, next slide. Oh, sorry. With the ITS system, it also enabled us to produce reports. So our on-time performance, so it's tracking those buses along the route. So we know if it's hitting stops at particular times. It helps us to then develop our network design as far as if we're hitting those stops in the right sequence, the right times, so then we can analyze that information and then push it forth if we need to change stop locations, whatever the case. It also gives us ridership information because part of our ITS system, we have our automatic passenger counters, which we refer to as APC. So those automatic passenger counters, anytime that somebody's getting on the bus, it counts them. Anytime they're getting off the bus, or alighting, as the term that we use in transportation, then it counts them as well. It has geofences around those, so every time we're getting on and off at a location, it pings that to that specific stop location. So we know exactly how many passengers are using the stop locations. And then again, we can use that information to develop our network design and know that those stops are necessary or if they need to just be moved. So there's also a bunch of other reports that we can pull from this information as well, but those are just kind of a few to highlight. Next slide, Jonathan. All right, so also wanted to talk about our partnerships within public transportation. As you can see, there's many different partners that we have in public transportation. If you want to go to the next slide. I took all the partners and I kind of broke them out into their different classifications. The jurisdictions, obviously we partner with Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Hayden, Dalton Gardens, and Hutter. The unique thing that we are able to do with each of these jurisdictions is we're able to meet and talk with all of their staff throughout for planning, as we did with their strategic service plan. We were able to meet with all their GIS and some of the engineers within the cities. So we have a very good partnership in really developing the different networks and how it can work for public transportation. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the strategic service plan, but just kind of wanted to highlight that. The cities also provide funding, as the board knows, through our letters of agreement with the jurisdictions, and Dorian's going to talk a little bit more about that later on. So our funding and reporting, so these are the main agencies that really provide a lot of our funding and that we have to report to on a monthly, quarterly, annually, triennial. So they're all the agencies that we just have to report to on a regular basis. Obviously with the county being the main recipients of the FTA funds, and then we also plan with KMPO. So we partner with KMPO to coordinate different transportation plans across Kootenai County. We do this through multiple programs such as the Transportation Improvement Program, the Unified Planning Work Program, and the Non-Motorized Transportation Plan. There's also other opportunities that we have to meet with KMPO through our KCAP board and through the KMPO board meetings as well. we're able to really coordinate with all the different transportation areas throughout Kootenai County. So it's roadways, waterways, railways. Everybody's able to then really make sure that we're providing the correct planning across Kootenai County for all transportation. And so we're able to not only provide valuable information for public transportation, but we're also able to then put that information into our plans as well so that we can develop a network that really fits with all the new developments that are coming in and all the different roadways that they're planning to make improvements on. So KMPO is a recipient of federal funds, and through that there are some competitive grants that we're able to apply for at times. So they do provide some fundings through KMPO as well. Some of the plans that we submit to KMPO are our Transit Asset Management Plan and our Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. We do this along with our ridership and other information that we report to them on a monthly basis as well. We obviously partner with FTA, who is the main source of our funding. We have our 5307 annual apportionment that we receive from FTA on a yearly basis. With this, we are required then to meet all the different regulations for FTA and how we take care of our services. We have to make sure that we follow all the federally mandated procedures. Some of those are demonstrating our legal, financial, and technical capacity to carry out our programs and projects. So we're going to have to make sure that we're ensuring compliance with procurement requirements, including the uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards. So we're also required to comply with applicable civil rights statutes and implementing regulations, as well as complying with applicable safety and asset management requirements, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The other thing that we were able to do, which I'll talk about, is our competitive grants through FTA. So FTA does put out some competitive grants as well, beyond just their apportionments that they do to transit agencies. So one of those we'll talk about that we were able to get back in 2019. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on.
Jen,
Yes.
the competitive grants, are those 50-50?
It just depends on the grant. So yeah, it all depends on how it's set up. If it's a capital, then it could be 80-20. If it is for, it just depends on the grant structure and what they put out there. So some of them 50-50, some of them 80-20. And we have seen some that are a little bit different as well. But
And
for the most
100%
part,
during
typically.
COVID?
For the CARES Act, that was a different funding situation. So yes, the CARES Act funding was 100%. There was no match requirements for those. That's correct.
Thank you.
Hey, Chad, can you explain again what we get from KMPO?
So we have some competitive grants that KMPO puts out through their federal fund. So a lot of it has been 5339, which, that's mostly what we get from KMPO when we do competitive grants, is 5339 funds. We also partner with ITD. It kind of gets a little convoluted and confused because ITD as a state does not actually give us funds. They are just a pass-through entity. So they receive federal funds and then they pass those through to the different transit agencies, and we're the recipients of the 5310 and 5339 funds within that. So with that though, we still have the same reporting requirements as we do with FTA. So basically any reports or anything that we do for FTA, we then have to do for ITD as well. We also do some additional quarterly reporting for ITD on our financials and our operations. We have the Area Agency on Aging, which we had a competitive grant that we go before them, and we receive reimbursement funds from the Area Agency on Aging, or AAA as we call them. But those are reimbursement funds for specifically our 5310 services that we provide, our Ring a Ride program. Transportation, we partner with the Kootenai tribe. We have the Kootenai tribe, we have an agreement with them, a recipient agreement, where they provide our fixed route services in Kootenai County. So the Kootenai tribe, through their own funding, they also provide fixed route services and demand response services like we talked about earlier through Worley, Plummer, Tensett, and DeSmit. And those are the City Link South that we talked about earlier. Dorian's going to talk a little bit more about it later, but the tribe also provides match funding for Kootenai County Public Transportation. And then we also have a contract with MB Transit. MB Transit is just a purchase of service agreement, so we purchase the service from MB Transportation in order to provide our ADA paratransit and our Ring a Ride services within Kootenai County. And then we have Kootenai Health, who provides our non-emergency medical transportation throughout Kootenai County as well. They go into Hayden, Coeur d'Alene, and up into Rathdrum to provide those services. We have a collaborative and cooperative agreement with them in order to provide that. So we provide the buses, they provide the trips. They also provide the maintenance on those buses, and through that we're able to get our in-kind match from Kootenai Health. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Olivia and Chris, and they're going to walk through our strategic service plan and what we were able to find out kind of going through that first. But is there any questions?
Do you
or
have any
anything?
questions for Chad first? Before we
Will you guys talk about ridership on fixed route para and then the Ring a Ride later on here?
We don't go specifically into the ridership,
Okay.
but if there's a specific question that you have, I'm more than happy to answer it on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you get the monthly ridership graphs?
I don't know, do we get that?
Okay, because that would be
Yeah,
something
I
easy.
can add them onto the list without
Yeah.
any issue.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Anything else there? Okay. All right.
So I'll dive into the strategic service plan. So the goal is to improve connectivity and accessibility throughout the county. And so in doing that, rethinking different strategies, increased use of technologies, and greater collaboration among the stakeholders. I feel like in phase one, that was the biggest item that we really tackled was creating that education and collaboration with the stakeholders. I don't know if you want to skip to the slide. So we had a steering committee of everybody in Coeur d'Alene, more of the planning departments in Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Hayden. We included Rathdrum because we know that will be an increasing demand in services, and KMPO. And then we also engaged Kootenai County GIS as well as the GIS the players in all of these jurisdictions. So throughout this process, it was interesting how the transformation from day one to the end, how much more educated they were as we analyzed all of the information that Chris is going to go through. But they got more and more excited, and which is great on an education perspective for maybe even future funding opportunities in those jurisdictions. So if you want to skip to the next slide. So we started in 2021. It was a while ago, but that was COVID, so there were few and far between. But we worked with all of these working groups, the steering committees throughout this whole process. And then we did some more statewide engagements as well with CTAI and ITD, as well as including giving council updates more recently.
CTAI?
Community Transportation Authority.
Of Idaho.
What's that?
I think of Idaho.
Of Idaho, yes.
Yeah.
I actually used to sit on that board it basically is that what he was talking about, Chad was talking about with the ITD funds and how they're a pass-through. They have these, in each region, they have a CTAI board that helps figure out where funding is allocated. So next slide, please. So I think I'm going to Chris, do you want me to hand it over to you now?
Sure. So basically, we were charged with, this is a very small system, and it actually does a great job with doing more with less. And we just want to continue to optimize what the resources that the county does have to provide the service. So to do that, we were going to look at the existing system as well as potential future markets for transit service, and to make sure that we're going to the right places. To do that, we are going to develop a clear and objective approach using criteria that are directly linked to performance. And I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. Mainly though, we want to get out ahead of this. Some service providers, they react to growth. We want to be proactive and to see where future service might be provided. Next slide. So identifying transit markets. Some people refer to this as transit orientation, and you kind of know it when you see it. Most of us, when we travel, there's clearly transit-friendly cities and towns and non-transit-friendly cities and towns. And we have that here in the county, just on a smaller scale. So we wanted to come up with an approach to compare different parts of the county. And to do that, we wanted to look at physical and social infrastructure directly related to ridership. Next slide. So usually when planners talk about transit orientation, they start with the 3 Ds: density, diversity, and that's land use mix, mixed use, and design. So that's like urban form. Other things, pedestrian friendly, essentially to access transit. Next slide. Over the years, people just pile on more Ds, so we wanted to try to keep it a little simpler. So next slide. The density, it's kind of a D word, and you see this in states across the country. The former governor of Oregon once said, if there are things Oregonians hate is density, next slide, and sprawl. So the trick is like, well, we don't like sprawl, that means you have to kind of have density in some areas, and vice versa. So it's a double-edged sword. Next slide. So the criteria we came up with, instead of saying density, density still means people, whether that's residents and employees. So they're not just big, ugly apartment complexes that cause traffic and crime. So you got to remember there are people living in those places. Then the other factors, next slide. Again, we want to make sure that they're linking to ridership. Next slide. So to quantify those, density is population density. That's people, not dwelling units. I wanted to recognize that family neighborhoods have a lot of people. They might not have a ton of units, but there's kids there that might take the bus to go to the skate park or go downtown during the summer. So that's a good potential market. Destinations, that's employment density. Research has found it's actually more important for transit to be close to jobs than residences. If you think about it, most of us live in a neighborhood because we like it, so we don't mind walking through it. But when it comes to getting to work, we want to get off that bus and walk straight into our office. Diversity of uses. You can't really ask someone to take transit if when they take the bus, then they can't run errands, they can't do dry cleaning, they can't grab a bite to eat. So it's good to have a mix of uses, certainly at the end of your trip, but also close to home as well. Design, this is tricky. People can argue what makes for good urban form and places that people are willing to walk or ride their bikes. Instead, we're just going to look at a pedestrian scale grid of blocks. So by that, I'll get into this and I'll show it. People are more likely to walk where the blocks are smaller because there's more different streets and routes you can take to get where you're going. Demographics. This is kind of that social component. households with low vehicle ownership. And here, I've done this in larger cities, and I just looked at 0-car households. Here, I looked at 0 and 1-car households, because the percentage of 0-car households is pretty low. And then low-income households. Low-income populations, clearly, they tend to be more captive to transit. That's their only option to get around, to get to jobs, to get to appointments. Next slide. So here's that linkage. So if you look at the horizontal axis, that's total population employment. So as that goes up, walking, biking, transit trips all go up. It's not a perfect line relationship, but it is a general relationship. The R-squared score for those statistics people out there is relatively strong. Next slide. So again, that's people that we're trying to provide service to. Next. And jobs. Jobs and schools, educational opportunities. Obviously the Kootenai Health is a huge employer. You got the downtowns, the people who access transit, and then Walmart. The 2 Walmart stops are 2 of the highest ridership stops in the system. And so I don't want to discount that. People usually don't associate Walmart with being transit friendly. Well, it is, because people use it to get there. Next slide. Diversity, that's that mix of uses. Again, people are more likely to take the bus to work if they know when they get to work, they can, go to the post office, they can go to the pharmacy, they can get some lunch. It makes it a much easier way to live a transit lifestyle. Next. So that, again, that land use mix also is related to higher transit ridership. Again, not a perfect relationship, but it's an upward trend. Next slide. Design. This is that walkability component. Again, I didn't want to look at architectural styles or a number of street trees or what have you. I just simplified it to block structure. And that's, you see that in the upper corner. Next slide. So here's that relationship. Here, as block size goes up, ridership goes down. Next slide. The magic comes when you put all those together. So this is those 3 components combined and related to transit ridership. So it's a much stronger R squared score. So there is that strong linkage between the 3 Ds and transit ridership. Next. Demographics. So this is that low vehicle ownership. Over 80% of transit riders have 1 car or less available. So it's huge. Low-income households, over 65% of transit riders have incomes of less than $50,000 a year. So again, these are the low vehicle ownership. That captures not only low-income households, but also people who have fewer cars by choice. You see this with empty nesters. Sometimes they'll drop the car and they'll just drive less as a general rule. It might include young professionals where one spouse drives, but the other spouse is able to ride the bike or take the bus. Next. So here we took those criteria and essentially created heat maps for each of those components. So here's population as of 2020 census. Next slide. So what I'll point out here, there's our 3 lines, the A, B, and C routes, but I also included a half-mile walk shed around those areas, or actually a quarter mile, because that's what they found people are willing to walk to access bus service. So the existing system does a pretty good job of accessing existing density, the exceptions being Rathdrum as it continues to grow. Some of these blue areas, that's Coeur d'Alene Place. Again, lots of families. Right? Next slide. Here's based on KMPO's projections for 2040. Here's where you really see the prairie start to develop. Next slide. Employment, this is much more tightly wound around the existing system. You know, employment centers are much more fixed, whereas residential tends to spread out more. So, no surprises here, downtown Coeur d'Alene is a large employment center. The health center is biggest, and then you've got certain nodes along 95 and along and through Post Falls. Next slide. Employment into the future only intensifies, and this is where the existing system really does a good job in providing good service to job centers, except for Riverbend, which there used to be service in the past. That might be something that's revisited in the future. Next slide. This is that mixed use, you know, retail and services. Again, the existing system does a really good job in providing service to those areas. Next slide. 2040, that just, again, intensifies along those corridors. Next slide. Pedestrian scale blocks, these are those smaller block sizes. You know, the historic downtowns, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, all tend to have those smaller blocks. Because when they were built, you know, the infrastructure wasn't didn't need to be as wide. You know, fewer people drove at the time, so those blocks were much smaller when they were built. Next slide. Here you see that block pattern. You know, you can probably recognize this real quick. This is downtown Coeur d'Alene with those smaller blocks, and this is the transit that goes through downtown in Shirley. Now you can contrast that. Next slide. So this is north of 90, up Ramsey, 95. You know, you've got many more cul-de-sacs where people, they have to circumvent to get outside of their neighborhood to the transit. So it makes for much longer walking trips. Next slide. Low-income households, yeah, the existing system does a good job here, providing pretty good service to those areas. Next slide. And this is the low vehicle ownership. So again, these are folks that maybe due to income and or choice, they have fewer cars, so they're more likely to take transit or need transit. Next. So you put all those together for a composite transit orientation map. Next slide. And there you have it. So with the exception, you know, there's Rathdrum, Riverbend. Besides those two, the existing system does a really good job in providing service to those strong transit markets in the county. Last slide. Rather, it's also handy if, as moving forward, the county wants to look at, well, should we move stops? Should we add stops? You can zoom in and superimpose that heat map on individual areas. So advance the slide. So this is Hayden. So this is really good for where should stops be located, or best located. And you can zoom in on any part of the county to do this. Next slide. Using KMPO's projections for employment and population, we're also able to look at transit orientation in 2040. So Prairie continues to develop, Rathdrum continues to intensify a little bit, but so too existing systems continues to provide really good service. And next slide. With that, I will kick it back to you.
Do you have any questions for Chris? It's always nice to see the visuals, and so it kind of gives you a better sense of where everything's at. But So our next step is to really analyze those bus stops and any other types of network enhancements that we can analyze. And Chad has been doing a great job with the cost allocation model, which I think you're going to get into, which everything that we're leveraging all the existing resources, everything that Chad's doing, everything KMPO is doing, everything that all the cities are doing, we're putting it all together to really help evaluate and prioritize where things should be. And so with that, this is going to be our next phase. It's the network enhancement that includes the cost allocation model, which will help with the inputs that we analyze, the bus stop evaluation prioritization, site assessments, a use analysis, and then we're going to be meeting with major employers. And then throughout all of this, we really want to do more engagement with the stakeholders, including you guys, if you're willing to do a ride along. I don't know how many people have ridden the bus, but it's kind of fun to just hop on and kind of get a good sense of what's going on. And so I think so we're going to be meeting with each jurisdiction and do ride-alongs and analyze with the planning departments all of the different stops. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chad.
Is there
I have a question. Can you explain what you mean by network enhancement?
Yeah, so what we are thinking is, how does the network work right now?
What is the network?
All of the routes, the transportation.
So it's route enhancement, really?
Yes, each route, yeah, for lack of a better word, yep,
Okay. All right.
yep.
any other questions on any of that? Okay. All right, so we're going to pass it over to Dorian to talk a little bit about our public transportation funding and expenses.
So I'm going to shift a little bit so I can see the screen. And bear with me because I'm not the pro that Chad is, because as you know, I am transitioning from grants management into transportation, and so learning everything and getting a lot of support from Kim and Chad. So thought I'd put that out there as well. Public transportation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and do the next slide, thanks. Sources of funding for public transportation, funding and expenses. The cost of providing public transportation service falls into two main categories, and that is operating and capital expenses. Operating expenses include vehicle operation and maintenance of facilities, general administration, training, and purchase of transportation service from private operators. And so in the county's case, that would include MV transportation that provides the paratransit and bring-a-ride programs. Kootenai County Public Transportation reimburses the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, as well as Chad discussed earlier, for expenses, eligible expenses that are specific to fixed route operating costs. This is primarily for their drivers and maintenance of the fixed route fleet. And capital expenses are related to our long-term planning and purchase of equipment, such as buses, bus shelters, facilities, etc. So as Chad was discussing earlier, we receive FTA 5307 funds, which are an annual apportionment. And this is the sole source of funding outside of competitive grants. So unlike most states in the U.S., Idaho does not provide direct funding for public transportation. Kootenai County is a direct recipient of these 5307 funds from FTA. The fiscal year 25 budget was presented to the board in the FY25 Program of Projects, or POP as we call it, which you'll see on a slide in a few minutes. But it's important to note that these funds are apportioned directly to the county, and we have to, but even though they're apportioned directly to us, we do have to apply for them with grant applications. So then there's the 5310 competitive grants and the 5339 competitive grants, and as Chad discussed earlier, those are pass-through grants from Idaho Transportation Department, and they are competitive. We do have to apply for them and then compete against other applicants. Kootenai County is the subrecipient of these grants, just just like the tribe is a subrecipient of the county's 5307 funds. These funds are passed down from FTA through the through ITD and are competitive, as we discussed. We have to apply for them. The 5310 grants fund the county's Ring Right program specifically, and then 5339 grants fund capital projects that replace, rehabilitate, and purchase buses, vans, and related equipment, as well as construction of bus-related facilities. And then the partner agencies and local match. So as Chad discussed earlier, the jurisdictions or the cities, their match is based on population. And every year there's a 3% annual increase, or what we call the annual ask. Then Kootenai Health, their match consists of monthly operating service expenses, for non-emergency medical transport. And then the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, their match consists of a portion of their eligible expenses, which are not reimbursed by Kootenai County. So next slide, please. Then we have determining match. Matching, or cost sharing as we call it, means that a portion of a project's cost is not paid by federal funds. So matching funds are typically stated as a percentage of the total project cost. Cash or local match includes funds spent for project-related expenses and cash provided by public transportation partners. The allowable match has to include costs that are necessary, reasonable, and allowable under the federal program. Third-party in-kind matching includes, but is not limited to, the valuation of non-cash contributions provided by a third party. And in-kind match is a non-cash contribution that is donated or provided for use toward eligible project activities. And that has to be within the project's period. This can include volunteer time, donated products, or donated services, and basically includes any transaction where funds do not change hands. That can be considered an in-kind contribution. Grantees have to provide the correct amount of match funds for a project, and use the funds on allowable expenses only, and maintain records for audits or site visits. So for capital activities, typically we see an 80% federal and 20% local match on those, and then for operating expenses, it's typically 50-50, 50 federal, 50 local, when and where allowed. So as you see with these slide graphics here, we're going to kind of walk through how you would calculate the different kinds of match. So for a project with a total spending authority, or a GL expense, of $125,000, to calculate cash match, you would first need to determine your total project cost, which we said was $125,000, we know. And then you would calculate the federal grant amount, by multiplying the total project cost by the federal share amount. So in this instance, it's 80%, so you would multiply the total by 0.8, which gives us $100,000. And then to calculate the local cost share, you multiply by your local required percentage, which is 20% in this instance. So take your 125 by 0.2, and it gives you 25,000. So when you combine those two, it gives you your total spending authority of 125,000. But then to calculate in-kind match, it's done a little bit differently. In order to maximize the use of the funding, grant funding, we use in-kind match. And to calculate the in-kind match amounts for a project that will have the same total spending authority as, of 125,000, you take your total amount of 125,000 and you divide that by the federal share match requirements of 80%, or 0.8, to get your total project cost. So in this case, we divided 125,000 by 0.8%, and then that gives us 156,250. Then to calculate your federal grant amount, you multiply the total project cost by that federal share amount. So using that 80-20 example again, you multiply the 156,250 by 0.8, and it gives us 125,000. And then to calculate your local cost share, you multiply that by your 20%. So 156,250 multiplied by 0.2 gives you the 31,250, and you add the 125,000 to that, and that gives you your total project cost of 156,250. But do keep in mind that that in-kind amount does not add to the total spending authority or the GL expense of the project. The other important thing to keep in mind with match is that these amounts are set by the grants notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO is what we call it, and that's a requirement of the grant funding, so you can't change those percentages and amounts. Next slide, please.
Real quick, I noticed that we're on the hour. I don't know if we need a break at this point.
Yep, I think that would be good. All right, so take 5 minutes, Bill, is that good? 10?
If I'm not back at 5, I'll be back in 10.
Okay.
So moving on to the program of projects. The program of projects, or POP, as we said before, is a list of projects that are proposed by a recipient for a given fiscal year to be funded from the Urbanized Areas Section 5307 annual apportionment. The POP includes a brief description of the projects, total project costs, federal share, and local share for each project. The POP is updated on an annual basis as required by FTA. And as a public transportation agency, we first start by identifying and selecting projects that we need to have included in the program of projects. These projects include things such as capital, operating, or planning. In compliance with requirements and guidelines from FDA, Kootenai County conducts public involvement activities for the proposed plan of projects, which includes the publication of the program of projects, and then this provides an opportunity then for the public hearing. After we have finalized the POP, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, KMPO, will include these projects in their Metropolitan Transportation Plan, known as the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP. And the TIP then feeds into the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is the STIP. And then this will give us the ability to draw down funds for each of these projects that are listed on the POP for that given fiscal year. Annually, the recipient certifies to FTA that it has the legal, financial, and technical capacity to carry out its proposed program of projects. And this includes safety and security aspects of the program. Agencies are required to be able to provide a financial plan delineating the source of non-federal share or local share, and the amounts applicable to different sources, and the time frame for acquisition of the federal share. Recipients must have a multi-year financial plan, 3 to 5 years, for operating and capital revenues and expenses to implement FTA awards. And Kootenai County Public Transportation also has a 10-year capital plan, which is part of the program of projects. All financial plans should indicate adequate revenues to maintain and operate the existing system, to complete the program of projects. So next slide. And then this is the 5307 grant life cycle. So the 5307 funds, they're part of the annual apportionment. And so the POP, the program of projects, is prepared in March and requires BOCC approval. So we bring that to you in a business meeting before we publish the notice for the required public hearing. Then the public hearing, Kootenai County Public Transportation public hearing, is presented and requires BOCC, the POP then requires BOCC adoption before it can be forwarded on to KMPO. Once with KMPO, the Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP, which includes the county's program of projects, is presented at KMPO's public hearing. And once the TIP is adopted by KMPO, it's forwarded on to the Idaho Transportation Department. And then once it is at the Idaho Transportation Department, the STIP, or the State Transportation Improvement Plan, which includes KMPO's TIP and the county's program of projects, is presented and at their own public hearing, and then once approved, it gets forwarded on to FTA. FTA approval of the Idaho STIP occurs in January, and at that time, Kootenai County can then apply for a portion 5307 grant funds. TRAMS, or Transit Asset Management System grant applications, are submitted to the BOCC for approval before we submit those on TRAMS to FTA. And then once we receive notification in TRAMS of award, then we bring those awards back to the board for you to review and review and approve. And then after the awards are finally expended, then we come back again to the BOCC when that's time for closeout approval. And then we submit those final grant closeouts in the TRAMS platform. And that covers the life cycle. So I'll turn it back to Chad.
All right, was there any questions on the financial side of things?
Well, I would like to have some papers to look at. I mean, that was very quick.
Yeah. Yeah, we can check with Julie.
She
I
doesn't
can also.
have anything.
She, I don't know. Okay. So we'll get those.
It'd be nice to have
Yeah.
that kind of stuff to look at.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets, not
Yes.
snippets of spreadsheets.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely provide the spreadsheets and everything. So, okay. Any other questions for? Oh. All right. So now we're going to talk about the public transportation planning. So public transportation service planning identifies services, network design, and network redesign if needed. It includes route level planning, service scheduling, and levels of service and capacity. Useful transit is essential for cities to thrive, as we talk about with our strategic service plan. And it supports development and economic growth while mitigating congestion, reduce the public health and environmental harms of transportation, and provides an affordable choice so that residents can access jobs and services without the expense of having a private vehicle if they don't need that. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the plans that we go into. Our Coordinated Public Transportation Human Service Transportation Plan identifies the transportation needs of individuals with disabilities, older adults, and people with low income. The Human Service Transportation Plan is an important tool for community transportation planning, and this plan creates a systematic way of communities to improve collaborative and also communication across human service organizations and transportation providers. The plan assists with improving access, efficiency, and effectiveness of community transportation systems. It's developed and approved. The development and approval must go through a process that includes participation with the seniors, with individuals with disabilities, representatives of the public, and private and nonprofit transportation and human service providers and other members of the public utilizing transportation services. So the Human Transportation Plan is updated on a regular basis. It's every 2 to 5 years. This is required from FTA, and the previous updates to this plan have taken about a year to complete. We're also talk about our Transportation Improvement Plan a little bit more. The Transportation Improvement Plan, or the TIP as we refer to it, is a 6-year plan that identifies, prioritizes, and allocates funding for transportation projects. The TIP is financially constrained and is the short-term component of KMPO's long-range transportation plan. So the TIP is updated annually with adoption by the KMPO board, as we talked about, and its development of the TIP is a continuous process involving agency staff and public involvement. So prior to the board's adoption of the TIP, there is always the 30-day comment period to provide public input like we talked about. Another plan that we collaborate with KMPO on is the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWOP, we refer to that one as. This identifies planning priorities and activities to be carried out within a metropolitan planning area. These activities allow for the continuous updating of the regional travel demand model and revisions to the regional transportation plans. The regional model and plans are used to support land use decisions and various transportation planning efforts in Kootenai County, like we have talked about with our partnering with KMPO. This is where this really comes to fruition here. So additionally, the UPWAP tasks are established to respond to emerging regional transportation issues as they occur during the course of the year. So development of the UPWAP is intended to be a coordinated and collaborative process, which involves the KMPO staff, Kootenai County Public Transportation staff, the 11-member agency of KMPO, and the representatives from KMPO's Technical Advisory Committee, also known as KCAT. Is there any questions on any of that so far?
The Public Transportation Human Services Transportation Plan, that we're doing that this year?
That is one of the things that we need to start on very soon because we have met our 5 years from the last time. So yes, that is one that we have to start working on immediately.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So we're also going to talk, go ahead, next slide, Jonathan. We want to talk a little bit about one of the competitive grants that we received from FTA, as we mentioned earlier. So in 2019, Kootenai County submitted a grant proposal to explore an open architecture fair payment system and won that competitive grant for an integrated mobility innovation project, or they refer to it as IMI. This project again was funded by FTA, or the Federal Transit Administration. So the Federal Transit Administration and the Integrated Mobility Innovation Program funds projects that demonstrate innovative and effective practices, partnerships, and technologies to enhance public transportation's effectiveness and increase efficiency, expand quality, promote safety, and improve the traveler's experience. They funded 25 projects in 23 states for this particular grant, and Kootenai County Public Transportation was one of those grantees. So partnering with Passio Technologies, we have developed a regional mobility platform which can integrate transit and shared use mobility options. This regional mobility platform is intended to bring all mobility options into one comprehensive application for multimodal travel comparisons. So our mobility platform, as part of the multimodal system, seeks to integrate biking and walking networks with our transportation networks in order to provide a complete mobility network for our region. So we sought to partner with other public agencies as well as private agencies to really make sure that this was a full integration, really wanting everybody to be able to participate, so anybody coming into Kootenai County can look in one location and they can find transportation options without having to have their own personal car. So, yeah.
I'm sorry. Could you kind of explain that in a little simpler language here? What exactly is this supposed to do for somebody?
So what somebody is able to do is they come into Kootenai County and they need to go from their hotel and they need to go to Denny's, or they need to go even further out. So what we did is we made it so other providers can put their information into ours.
And what would an other provider do?
So like Spot Transportation up in Sandpoint, Silver Express who goes out into the Silver Valley. We've talked with Scott's Taxi in the local area. So what it would do is it would provide options for the passenger, for the person who is trying to get somewhere. What we're trying to do is make it so they can go to one place to find all their transportation needs. So if they want their trip to be a little cheaper, they can partner with the fixed route, take the fixed route part of the way. And then from there, a taxi with Scott's Taxi would then take them their final mile or 2 miles or whatever that might be outside of our zone for fixed route. So that's kind of where it was all trying to go,
Mhm.
as well as provide those walking and biking paths. So again, they have more options to get where they need to go within Kootenai County.
And where's Uber and Lyft in this equation?
That is another one that we hadn't talked to yet, but that is who we had initially thought to add in the project, but at this point in time, we have not had those conversations, but it is something that other transportation agencies have had success with,
Mhm.
and so it is something that we would pursue later on. So that has been conversations that we've had and thought about, it's just not something that's happened as of yet.
Okay.
But we have not excluded the possibilities of partnering with them as well.
So,
The,
go ahead.
the issue that you have with Uber and Lyft and those are they like to keep all the information themselves and they don't like to share it.
Mhm.
And so the partnership becomes a little difficult, and navigating that has been something that FTA has really been working with and trying to figure out the best way to go about those. So for our point in the project, it didn't seem useful yet because there was still so much to be figured out as far as the relationship federally and privately. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm. So as we talked about, the app can tie public and private transportation providers together, along with providing a payment option. So in order to accommodate additional modes of transportation and close the gaps in the transportation service that we kind of talked about with those being deserts there's not really much transportation options out there. So travelers will have the ability to choose from available transportation options and select the mobility option that works best for their individual need. Trips across multiple providers, like we talked about, that way it could be seamless, and then they would just have one place, one payment, and it would take care of everything for them. So the benefit to riders it'll be more cost-effective transportation and additional mobility choices and solutions for their needs.
And who's gonna be handling that money? Is it the private organization at that point, or is it the county?
So we would have to figure out who would be the main holder of the funds, but it would most likely be the county because we're the ones that would be pushing forward this project. But we're not to that point yet. That's still something that we're trying to figure out all the ins and outs of and everything. So this is still in the development stage. We don't have anything in place. And we haven't, because of COVID, when we were putting all this out, we don't actually have any private transportation agencies partnered yet. Scott's Taxi, when we initially put forth the IMI project, they were keenly interested in it. They really wanted to be a part of it, but then when COVID hit, they just didn't have the personnel to be able to do that. So that is still things that we need to get figured out as far as when or how this goes forward, then where would that sit, so.
And that will probably affect, I would say, having a conversation with the treasurer, and it'd be important on that aspect
Yes.
too.
Yep.
There were some conversations with the treasurer
Yes.
early on in this project, making them aware of this.
Is it possible that we just may never get a private partner?
It's entirely possible. Yeah, that is entirely possible.
Well, if we don't get a private partner, then why would we want to charge money?
We wouldn't have to for our purposes.
Uh-huh.
So it wouldn't be necessary at that point to have that possibility. But we have had some recommendations from jurisdictions to potentially start charging fares. They have expressed interest in us charging fares at some point.
Which jurisdictions?
Post Falls specifically.
Okay.
They have expressed that in the city council meetings prior. So that's a very long and extensive road, but this gives us an option if we did have to go down that road. It would be a much cheaper option than putting your traditional fare collection systems on the buses.
Mhm.
Because that is very costly, and anytime that you're dealing with cash, then you have to have even more personnel to take care of that cash.
But what happens if you don't have a smartphone?
That's where we would then have to figure out as far as partnering with other agencies like your nonprofits where we could then have voucher systems. And if you don't have a smartphone, then you would just bring your voucher on the bus, you would show it to the driver, and then it would give you access to but those are just some of the options that we've explored. I mean, obviously, we're not to that point because we are not charging a fare at this point in time, and we're not looking to charge a fare at this point in time, but it gives us the option if we do go down that road. If we do go down the road of fares, it is a lot of more planning that FTA does require in order to really look at where this is going to have a disparate impact throughout the community. And so it's an extensive process. It's not just we say we're going to implement fares and it's done. It's a very extensive process from there.
Okay.
I think that Bruce is asking a lot of the same questions that I was asking, and the important thing was while we had the funding to build the framework so that it was ready to plug in if and when we get to that point. But it was such a competitive grant to be able to do everything that we did was awesome. So it's there if we ever need it, but right now.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like it's practical at this point in time. So you know, the moment you stop working on it, the moment it becomes outdated.
Right.
And you have to kind of almost start over again.
Thankfully,
If
we're
it doesn't
working
get
with the same vendor that does our ITS system.
Okay.
So we have a close working relationship there.
Yeah.
So it would be
And when do the funds run out for this?
We have already expended the funds for the IMI, so it's now it's just we have the program and we have it through Passio, and it's actually part of our paratransit system. So it's just our ongoing expenses now for the paratransit. So we don't have any additional cost for keeping it up. But if we were to add other providers, then there would be additional costs that those providers would then have to take on. Any other questions so far on that then? Okay. So as we're talking about this, we're looking to advance our mobility options throughout Kootenai County and the surrounding area. That's why we were looking to go up to Spot, where we were looking Silver Express, so that we can help people just be able to navigate. And eventually, we were thinking it would be good somebody could get on and just go throughout the state of Idaho or other areas. So just that connectivity throughout the whole region. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our cost allocation model. So in order to better express a cost-benefit analysis of public transportation to the local jurisdictions and other partners, we have been working on a cost allocation model. This will be used to determine the full cost breakdown for delivering transportation services by vehicle hour, vehicle mile, and per passenger trip. This also helps to determine the fully allocated cost for providing service by individual route or service, the mode, service area, type of service, sponsor type, and then primary funding source if necessary. So this is something that we've been working on for a while, and it's taking longer than expected just because the way that we have to break down our costs for the county, and then we have to break them down differently for the cost allocation model for FTA. The cost allocation model, once done, again, it'll provide a large amount of information that will be very helpful in planning and really helping jurisdictions know if they want to add to the fixed route services, what the total cost is going to be, and if they only want to provide, certain service areas, how much it would be to add an additional stop or something of that. This just really helps us to wrap our heads around the costs, along with providing the benefit to the jurisdictions, to the county, really showing where the value is in public transportation. Because we do get that question, and we want to be able to provide that answer, and that's something that we're working towards, is really be able to show that cost-benefit analysis. So Is there any questions?
When do you think you might have that ready?
We are still currently working on getting all the information. We've made some pretty good strides lately, but I would say probably within the next 6 to 8 months is when we're anticipating to have that completed.
And that is to get down to the granular level of what it costs per rider.
Yes, yeah, get real granular on any aspect. So we can look at route specific, stop specific, passenger miles, and we can look at all that, what it would cost for.
Do you keep track of how far people ride the CityLink?
So unfortunately, with this current system, we're not able to do that because it's not specifically linked when somebody gets on. That's why we call it unlinked passenger trips, because we don't have anything associated with that particular passenger. So we don't know exactly how long that passenger is on or off the bus. What we do know is how long of a passenger load we have. So when we have passengers on the bus, then we can say there's 10 passengers, we went a mile, there's 10 miles that we had a passenger load. So we do have that information, but unfortunately we don't have it specific to that passenger. So we don't know specifically when they got on and when they got off and how long they rode.
How are you capturing that information with passenger load?
That's with our ITS system. So anytime somebody's getting on, we have our APC, the automatic passenger counter. Like I talked about earlier, it has the geofence around there. So it says specifically which stop they got on the bus. And so we know that now that one person is on the bus and they're still on the bus because we haven't counted them getting off the bus.
Okay.
So with that APC counter, it actually looks for a human body. So it's looking for shoulders, it's looking for heads, and it has a precise algorithm of figuring that out so that it's not counting bags, it's not counting dogs, it is actually looking for a human being.
Is this a camera?
It is, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're mounted above the door of our passenger buses, so. Yeah.
With the new IMI and all of the Passio stuff you guys are working with them, can you not capture people coming in on and off with their geographic locations?
So,
I think manually watch it, right?
well, okay, so with our paratransit, we specifically know where those passengers are getting on and off because we have that information. We have to go pick them up, we have to drop them off. But on the fixed route, we don't. To get to that point, we would have to have a fare type system and people would have to participate on a smartphone or something like that. That would be the only way that we could capture on the
So with
fixed
your
route.
IMI though, they're just putting in their destinations, could you capture that information?
So we will have the ability, once we do have the trip planner, so we could take that information when people are plugging it in and we would have a rough guesstimate, but we don't know specifically if they take that trip or not. So again, it wouldn't be actually known,
It gives you a
but it
rough
gives a
idea.
rough idea as far as who would be using it and where they would be using it.
But right now, we know how many people get on and off at every single stop.
Correct.
We just don't know which person got on which stop and which person got off on which stop.
That is
Okay.
correct, yes. Yep.
So Chad, with your cost analysis, is that taking into consideration administrative costs
Yes.
as well as, building and all
Yeah,
that?
yeah, it's taking all costs, and that's why it's taking so long, is breaking it down. As you know, we have a lot of different costs, and really breaking it down into FTA terms and putting it towards the routes and everything, because we have all our costs associated, we have it all put in the county, but now we have to then reclassify them into FTA terms and everything for that, so, yes. Any other questions on? Okay. All right, so go to the next slide. Back to the as Dorian had talked about earlier with our transit asset management plan, we look at this 10-year projection for our capital expenses. What you're seeing here is our buses that we have planned out all the way to fiscal year 34. We take the useful life of our buses and we average out our mileage for the different uses for paratransit, for fixed route, and then we put that into the useful life of those buses and we then can project out how much funding we're gonna need in each of the fiscal years, and how many of the buses we're gonna order for each of the fiscal years, so we can accurately then project in our program of projects where we're gonna need the funding. So this is not something where we're just guessing that we're gonna need this amount of funding. We actually know that we're gonna need to bank this funding, we're gonna need to have it available for us. And a lot of that is through the jurisdiction contributions, cash match. We have to really keep a close eye on that, because that's where we use a lot of that funding, is to get the match for these capital projects like this. So the Transit Asset Management Plan, or TAM plan, is our strategic and systematic practice of procuring, operating, inspecting, maintaining, and rehabilitating and replacing transit capital assets, as we talked about, to manage their performance, their risks, and costs over their life cycles, or what we call their useful life benchmarks, or ULB. And that's in order to make sure that we provide a safe, cost-effective, and reliable public transportation system. This is, again, required by FTA, and we update this on an annual basis. As I talked about earlier, this is one of the plans that we provide to KMPO and also to ITD along with FTA. Okay, next slide. All right. Another one of the requirements that we have is our Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP. This includes a process and procedures to implement our Safety Management System, or SMS. The Safety Management System is a formal, top-down, organization-wide, data-driven approach to managing safety risk and assuring the effectiveness of safety risk mitigation. Transit agencies that receive FTA grants are required to develop and implement an agency safety plan, and this establishes our policies and processes and procedures to support the implementation of our safety management system. So this is a collaborative approach to manage safety. It brings management and labor together to control risk better, detect and correct safety problems earlier, and then share and analyze safety data more effectively, and then measure safety performance more precisely. The safety plan is updated annually, which we bring before the board for approval. And then again, we have to provide to FTA, ITD, and KMPO this plan as well.
Didn't we just approve this?
You did.
In the last week or two?
It was very recently, yes. Yeah, no, ordering is correct. Yep. All right.
Can you kind of explain that in a little different way? Sorry, but
So
the words are very abstract.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have to take a look at all of our transportation systems. We have to look at the network in all its totality, so safety and security being one of them.
And what is safety and security? Is safety like you're properly maintaining your vehicles?
Correct?
That you are properly vetting your drivers?
Yep.
And then what?
What
if a bad guy gets on the city link? What's your safety protocols there?
So it depends on the situation, but we do have protocol that we would go through in that scenario. So it obviously depends on if they're hostile or if they're just irritated and they want to get something off their chest, and or if they had a means of harming somebody, then obviously those would all require a different scenario in order to react to that. But we do have to take those all into consideration with the transportation safety plan, along with any of the network design and our buses, as far as the preventative maintenance that's taken on for those public transportation vehicles, all the equipment that's on them. It also takes into account the transportation station that we have, our Riverstone Transit Center, and then any of the bus stops as well. So we have to account for any foreseeable hazards as well as true hazards.
Okay.
We have to be able to say that this could potentially be a hazard, so we need to take care of it, mitigate it, do what we can to make sure that either the information is out there and available for people so they know, or we just have to make it so they can't cross this line. cases.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, so that is all that we had prepared, so we will take any questions or anything additional that you have.
What section during the meeting are we in right now? And do we just
Number
finish
7.
6 or on 7 now?
We just finished 7, so we're
Oh,
totally
okay.
done. Yeah. So I do have a question. So talking about, you know, what Chris was talking about and looking at these different spots that may crop up that, you know, we want to provide a different stop to because of the data. The data is saying that we want to provide a different stop, or maybe we want to get rid of this stop, or the cities come to us and say we want to add another stop. Is that something that you would always bring to the board?
Correct. So any changes to the network design, anything that is gonna then change our operations, we would bring before the board before we enact any of that. The other thing that we are required to do is put any changes that happen, we have to do a study on, and we have to really look into it based off of FTA regulations. We can't just change the network just on a whim. It's not possible, so.
Okay, so METS Groups makes a recommendation based on the data and
Yes.
they are going through their process. Then you take that and you say, okay, now I'm gonna run it through FTA, I'm gonna run it through the different agencies.
Yeah.
And then you come to the board
So
and say, this is what we.
we would first bring it before the board
Okay.
to say that this is what we're looking to do, and then take it to FTA, and then we would let the board know that this was approved by FTA or whatever the case is. So that would be the way that I would propose that, because then the board is on the initial instead of FTA already said yes, this, and so that's.
Perfect.
And I would assume it would maybe go through the cost allocation model to see what that costs.
Yeah, that would all be associated in there.
So that would include a current route map, proposed route map.
Yep.
As well as dollars.
Yes, correct.
I also think ridership should matter though, like, you guys do an analysis of, like, you know, a trend of ridership or anything like that, so we know whether, you know, we're getting more riders or what stops are not getting as much.
So we provide on a monthly basis to KMPO, to the board, and then other providers out there as well, the ridership information. We don't go as granular as each stop because that would be a lot of information to pass along, but we do have that available to us, yes. We can pass that along to anybody who's looking for that, so. We do have the ability to analyze through our Passio. We previously had a different provider, and then in 2018 is when we changed to, or 2019, we changed to Passio. So we can analyze back to 2019 with our current provider on the ridership information. We do have that historical information, but it would take a little bit more to then include that into the Passio information.
So just like a roughing it, do you guys see an increase in ridership then?
So this year we're sitting pretty much flat. We have not seen much of an increase. From month to month, you'll see a fluctuation of about 5% increase here and there. But ever since COVID hit, we had a pretty drastic reduction of about 25%. And we've been slowly ticking up, but this year has been relatively flat. We're about 1% of our fixed route. We have an increase of about 1%, so I just consider that flat. So
Yeah. I was just curious.
Yeah, every month, just right at the beginning of the month, we will get an email from Chad and from Alan with the tribe. And then that will give us all the graphs, and you can literally see exactly how many people used which route. And so it's super detailed.
I've got a number of questions.
Sure.
One, can I get a copy of this presentation?
Of course.
I'd like that.
Yeah.
Two, and it's in North Idaho, crazy. can people ride with concealed carry?
So we have talked with legal about that,
Who?
and legal, with our legal department.
Oh,
Kootenai.
legal, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And because it is concealed carry, they are allowed to still have that on the
Okay.
public transportation.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Yes,
We haven't had any incidences.
correct. We have not had any incidences, and we hope to never have
Oh, no, I got it. I brought up one, where the stops are located. Unless it's changed recently, there seems to be one in a flower bed.
Yes, so that stop is closed temporarily so that we can go through our process that we've been going through with our strategic service plan,
Right.
so that we can then move that
How
stop.
long has that been closed?
It's been closed for about a year,
Yeah, I was gonna
maybe a little
say.
longer than a year, because
That's a
it
slow
was,
process.
it was a stop that was identified as not being safe. So yes, that one, that one was.
It's a stop that makes us look silly,
Yes,
because here's a bus stop and it's dead in the middle of the flower bed.
yeah.
There's another stop that is right in front of Triple B Pawn and Loan.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the problems with that?
I'm not familiar with too many issues with that stop.
It's a planter's right there, a
Okay.
fixed planter. It's so high,
Mhm.
8 feet long, 6 feet across,
Mhm.
filled with rocks about as big as my fist. And of course, people sit on the planter
Okay.
while they're waiting for a bus. I'd sit there if I could. But what they do is they throw their butts in there, and they throw their syringes in there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's people who throw things around like that don't, plus there's the regular trash. And the previous owner said to me, what can you do about this? It's not fair for me to have to go out there every week with rubber gloves on and tongs to pick that crap out of there. Can you move it down a block where there's nothing? Or up a block, I don't care.
So
So
that's.
I checked,
Mhm.
and the answer was no.
That stop is very crucial for the fairgrounds. It does get a lot of ridership for individuals who visit the fair on a yearly basis
I
as
can
they
see
go
where
there.
it would.
And that is one of those that would probably be a key stop keeping at that location.
But up 100 yards
Mhm.
or down 100 yards, I don't think is gonna be,
Again, that could be something that we look at and analyze as far as if that's gonna make a difference
right.
to the riders.
Well,
And
I was told that you wouldn't look at it.
we're looking at everything right now because we are looking at the network as a whole. That's the whole reason that we're looking into this strategic service plan. And we've collected the data, now we're gonna analyze and we're going to then go between all the different jurisdictions with their planning departments. We're, like Olivia said, we're gonna do ride-alongs, we're gonna do all those things so we can really make sure that our network is well designed for everybody. Obviously, we can't make it perfect for everybody, but we're gonna do the best that we can as far as that goes. And so when it's properly supported by the data, then we will definitely look into it, so,
But it takes you a year to get it out of a flower bed.
yeah.
That's not cool.
What's that?
That's not cool. You look at that and people laugh at you and say, that's government in action.
Yeah, and we're doing everything that we can to obviously make it as quick of a process as we possibly can.
There's a sign
Unfortunately,
there.
there is. Yeah.
Instead of putting a closed, why don't we just remove the sign?
So, removing the sign would be changing the network without going through the process. So that's why we do have that put in place, just because of our regulations that we are required to meet.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I was told prior to running for county commissioner, that there are plans to charge. And then once I was elected, I asked, how's that coming? And I was told, we're not gonna do that. I think we should do that. I think that looks bad to the public also.
So that's what we had talked about with our IMI project. So we're putting that into place, but as far as right now, we're not looking to charge a fare. It does create some problems for some riders who don't have the ability to pay, and there is a lot of ridership that uses it to get to work, to get to education, to do those things. And so it's a lot more than just saying we're gonna charge a fare, like I talked about earlier. There's a lot of studies that you have to go through, you are required by FTA to go through before you can just put a fare in place.
Have we started on those studies?
No.
No. Is there any plans by anyone associated with the bus system to do anything with Spokane?
No. We have no intentions of joining with Spokane at this point in time. I mean, that would be something that would come before the board before we even had any decision towards that. So,
That's good.
yeah, I mean, it's ultimately the board decision on how we would proceed with that, so.
Thank you.
I seem to remember sometime early on that there was a ballpark number thrown out, and I think it cost more to charge a fare than we
Correct.
would be collecting.
Correct. Yeah, at best, throughout the nation, you have about a 20% recovery rate. And so you're not recovering very much of what you're actually putting into when you do charge a fare. Throughout the nation, there are so many transit agencies that are looking to go fare free because it then is more cost effective to be able to do that, and you provide better services for your individual passengers. So there have been many studies. Kansas was one that recently, they just took one of their transit systems and they went fare free because it was just so cost prohibitive to have the fare on there.
The thing that I've heard from a lot of people is, well, they're charging for that, aren't they? And remember, this is a political
Oh, yes.
organization here.
Yep.
And I go, no, they're not. And then it's a big why not, and,
But they don't understand all.
well, I know, and I don't have 2 hours to tell them. See, I mean, there's something there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the joke is, you know why they have smoked glass in those buses? So the public can't see how few people are riding those buses.
But I
I'm
hear
just telling you.
that. I hear that.
That's the psychology about the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I hear that, but if somebody was to actually ride the bus, they would see how many people truly use it on a daily basis. And it's easy to say that they don't see people on the bus, but if they were to actually get on the bus, they would see that there are individuals using it every day,
Well, I know
every
there are
hour.
individuals, but
Yeah.
by comparison with the number of seats available.
Yeah.
Because I always go by and kind of go. And I've seen as many as 5 and 6 people on a bus, but I've also seen none. I've seen 1. And then I'm not happy with the paratransit requirements.
Mhm.
Because when I go to Kootenai Medical and I say, I want to go home, they go, okay, and they take me
Yep.
right to the end of my driveway.
Yep.
And I said, why can't you go in the driveway? And they said, it's a liability issue. Okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are people who, they didn't ask me my name. I saw that survey that I need to fill out. I have to have it signed by my doctor, for God's sakes.
Yeah. So that is one of the great partnerships that we do have with Kootenai Health, because they do provide those non-emergency medical trips. And that is the main reason they're able to do that is because of our partnership.
Mhm.
So it is us who, Kootenai County Public Transportation, through the partnership, that we're able to provide those services.
I am not opposed to bus service.
Yep.
I'm opposed to bus service that looks like a government giveaway.
Yeah.
And I'm opposed to a bus service that has, I went over to the transit center 2 years ago on the coldest day. The transit center, that's how it was sold to us. And I went by there and everybody was standing out on the pavement. So I parked quite a ways away and tootled down there in my wheelchair and I said, how come you guys aren't inside? And it's one of those days. There's some poor guy standing there on aluminum crutches. You know, and you could tell he was not comfortable. He said, we're not allowed in there. So I came up and knocked on the door and was totally ignored. I knocked again and I was totally ignored. I mean, people saw me. And then I pounded on the door and they went, oh, that's a commissioner. And I was allowed immediately inside. But that's quite an edifice for the drivers and for some meetings and for some admin offices.
I believe that when the whole transit project came up, the community overwhelmingly said they did not want public inside.
Well, I didn't hear that from anybody, and I hear that today. You mean I can't go in there? And I said, that's correct.
Well, it's not a warming station.
No.
It's a, yeah.
And it does still have restrooms, it has, you know, shelter, where before that stop, I mean, it's basically a hub, it's a stop, it's just that gravel lot. So it is much nicer than it was,
But they're great offices. My goodness, when I went through there, it's spacious. It's got high ceilings, lots of space.
Did you have any follow-up questions?
No.
Okay. Right.
Those are just things I've had on my mind for a long time. And since you're here today, I thought I'd ask them, but I would like a copy of your presentation.
Okay, I will call for public comment, and our one gal seemed to.
Chairman Duncan, we did get one public comment from Richard Rowland. He wrote in and said, church shows a need for additional service along Harrison and 15.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, and
Thank you.
it is 10:59, meeting adjourned.
It wasn't 3 hours.
It was not 3 hours.